Here's another Mixing with Mike mixing tip brought to you by MPG Music Production School and MPGinsider.com. This is a tip on how to use parallel compression on drums. One of the great ways of enhancing a drum sound is to create a bit of hyper compression of the drums that you can blend or mix in with the drums. So the basic starting place would be to create a stereo auxiliary channel, which I'm going to do here. And so once I have my stereo auxiliary channel, I will just give it an appropriate name. This will just call it my drum squash. And from here, I'm going to assign a bus input. So I'll just make that bus 3 and 4. And what I'm going to do here is to assign all of my sends here to bus 3 and 4. So I'm going to select all of my drum tracks and just a little shift option here, assign these guys to bus 3 and 4. And now what I have is this going into here. I'm going to command click on the solo button. This will bypass it. And then I'm going to do two things here. One, I'm going to set up an EQ. So very quickly, I'm just going to set up an REQ here as a starting place, and then I'm going to set up a classic compressor, which is really good at this type of sound, the CL76. And I'm going to make these guys both come up. Now, the way that I set up the sends, if you notice, is that they're all in equal levels, so they're getting the exact same mix balances right now, anyway, as the ones that I have set up from before. So what'll happen here is that my mix, as I change it, will also be reflected exactly in the hyper compression. Now there is actually a great compressor which is part of the was like an 1178 actually, which was a stereo 1176, and essentially because with plugins it's all kind of laid out that way where it can be mono or stereo, then that's just basically not an issue. So we're just going to start there. Now with this particular compressor, one of the ways of making this work really effectively is to just set it up so that it's in all mode. And in the actual LA76, I'm sorry, 1176, and if you push all of the ratio buttons in at the same time, then you would get this sort of hyper compression mode, and that's effectively what we're going to be going through. Now what happens here with all of the rest of the drums is they're going through a bus and through an aux, and I'm going to mute that, so we're only going to hear the parallel compression going through here, right? So none of the drum tracks we're hearing. This would be the dry unprocessed drums. So this way we can hear just the effect of this. And the idea is that we really want the kick and the snare to kind of be pushing the compression. So, and the attack or release can be either fast or slow on the attack. Usually when you make it a fast attack, it makes this sound more distant, and what we're really going to get with this is we're going to get more depth. This is going to make the sound go farther back in the speakers, which is usually the effect and the reason why you do this kind of thing, but not necessarily. Now, one of the things that may be a real issue here, like you can hear there's a lot of hi-hat mic, is that it can actually mute some of that out, and there's already plenty that's kind of coming in from the overheads. And that may be probably, right, so that's primarily where that's coming in. So that may be an issue, but we'll kind of see what's going on with that. So maybe what I'm doing is going to lighten up the attack a little bit so this... And I want a pretty heavy amount of compression here. And now the idea here with the EQ and having the EQ up front is that I can actually start to affect or focus this where I want it to be. So I can actually take and raise so I can bring up a little bit of that low energy, and then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dip down and what I can really do is I can shape So I can roll off some of this craziness here. And get some of the boxiness out. So really, this is a way of just kind of shaping So there, I just kind of doing this to kind of carve off some of that hi-hat, that cymbal that I have going on there. So that's what it sounds like without the EQ. And what I can do is I can really focus this low-end energy to be exactly where I want it and kind of get this whole kick. And if anything is kind of sticking out here a little bit too much, like the toms, I can always back some of that energy off, or depending upon how much I want that. Seem to be getting a lot of it here regardless of what I have going on, so that must be coming through the overhead mics very clearly. So I can change or adjust my blend in here, right, and kind of play with this. And it's not a problem here to really exaggerate. And now what I can do here is take that out. You're going to have to reset your brain a little bit. And here is just the dry, unaffected drums. So now you can hear how much, it's lacking in presence, also in volume. So let's just kind of... And then let's mix in what we have here with the sidechain compression. And so I'm going to make a couple adjustments here. And I can really play with this and kind of adjust the tone here. So it gives us a little more pop out of the kick and the snare. And if I adjust or play with the attack, if I make it a fast attack, so I'm going to leave it there with a fast attack, and then I can kind of lower this a little bit. So that's with it, or without it rather. And you can hear how it really opens up the sound. And with the fast compression, or the fast attack on the compression and the fast release is really key because it creates the movement, the breathing movement. And if you'll notice what really happens, not just does that it gets brighter, but that it extends backward out the back of the speakers. So it increases the size or the perceived depth. This is without it. And again, I can really shape the tonal character here by the way that I add that in. And just mix in enough of what I need, right? So with the EQ, it's very important because leading into the compression, I could decide where I want that emphasis to be and what frequency areas, and I can also filter off those things like the hi-hat or the cymbals that might get, too bright and harsh sounding. So the filtering and the EQ prior to this is very important, keying into the compression and kind of getting that going. And if you want to, you can even apply distortion characteristics and do some things that give it a little more growl or gnarliness, and that will also help to add to some of the character for drums that seem to be like very generic sounding. You can give it some balls basically, and that's the whole idea of the parallel compression. Okay, so there is your mixing mic tip on using parallel compression on drums. At least just one idea, probably another one down the road somewhere. And you can join the live Mixing with Mike classes by going to mpginsider.com. They're every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, Mixing with Mike. Just click on the link after going to mpginsider.com.